So I'm very honored to have Jacob Huckle to start this multiliteracy event. Um, and so welcome, Jacob, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for all the great work that you do in this event, and the other work you do is it's great. So thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So this event, for those of you who are following us and don't know, it's an event around multilingual literacy in general. And so we're going to see it from different angles. So from teachers' perspective, researchers, experts, so various angles to talk about multilingual literacy. And so the reason I'm really happy to have you with us is because you are the cross-section between research and practice. So I'm going to attempt a short introduction. Feel free to add anything if you want to. But you're an international school educator in China and part-time doctoral student at the University of Bath's Department of Education, where your research focuses on multilingualism and interculturality. You have taken your school from a place where everyone was welcoming students' languages. They could see the benefits of speaking different languages, but in the classroom, they were not doing that much, to a place where now all the languages of the students are really seen and used as assets to improve their learning. So today, we have a mix of people following us, and we're going to probably catch up on the session as well. So we have teachers, parents. So I would like to talk about what you do in school, but also maybe afterwards what parents could do at home to support their children with all their languages. So is there anything you would like to add?
No, thank you for that introduction. I think you covered everything. I would just maybe say, yeah, we this is a journey that we're on within my school. So I wouldn't say that we're totally achieved our vision. There are still areas that we need to improve, and it's a kind of journey that we've been going on as a whole community. And yeah, just on a personal note, maybe it's helpful to say that this is a kind of personal matter for me as well in terms of my own family and identity. I've been living in China for nearly 12 years. I have family here, and my son is bilingual English and Chinese, so we're using both languages at home in our family. So this is a very kind of personal issue for me. It's not just a kind of professional topic in terms of my work and research.
Yeah, I think it's nice to know that it's not just like the professional eye, but you're also involved, it's your heart that's involved as well. And so before we start, can you explain a bit about the context in which you teach? So how old are your students in your school, but also the students you teach personally? And maybe what subject you teach as well would be nice to know. And also the students' linguistic background. So how many of your students have English as their strongest language? How many are actually learning English, but they speak another language at home? Any details you can think of?
Okay, yeah. Sure. So I'm in Suzhou in China, which is kind of fairly close to Shanghai, and I've been here for a long time, working in different international schools. My school is a British international school, so we have a kind of modified British curriculum with IGCSE and IB diploma program. It's an all-through school from nursery to year 13. We say in UK terms. I guess that's from pre-K to 12. So all age groups within the school, and those students come from a diverse range of different language backgrounds and cultural backgrounds. Largest groups, as well as English speakers, we have Mandarin Chinese speakers and Korean speakers, and then a lot of other different languages in terms of like smaller numbers of students using those languages. And actually almost all the students, if not all the students, can be considered multilingual because they're developing their proficiency in multiple languages. They all study Chinese, for example, as well as learning English and foreign languages within the curriculum, and home languages are taught within the curriculum. We teach Chinese as a home language and Korean as a home language or first language, as well as English as a first language. So there's a large range of different language profiles, and a large majority of students use English as an additional language in terms of it's maybe not their first language or their home language. And within that, there's a range of English proficiencies from beginners, maybe in the younger students, especially just those who are beginning to learn English, up to more advanced bilingual students. And then so there's maybe a smaller number of students who are receiving kind of additional support to access the curriculum through English, through EAL programs. But there's really a wide range of English proficiencies. Maybe even within one classroom, there may be a diverse range of languages and proficiencies within those languages. And then I also think it's important to think about the diversity in terms of how the students feel about their languages, how they use their languages, the role that those languages play. For some students, English maybe is just an academic language that they need to learn to pass their exams. For other students, it has it's more part of their identity, and it's important to who they are. And then there are students who are the parents are working hard to try to maintain their other languages, as students maybe want to focus more on learning English to prepare for their further studies. So there's a kind of large range of needs and attitudes and beliefs about languages, which makes it complex but interesting, kind of rich environment to work in. Like many international schools, the community is quite mobile. People come and go. Many students may come with their parents on maybe 3-year contracts with the companies. So this presents some challenges in terms of how we can work with them to develop their languages, but also some great opportunities as well, and to rethink the way we kind of think about language education. And personally, for my own teaching as an educator, I teach English language acquisition, which is sometimes called ESL or EAL, ELL in different schools, and I teach that in the middle school and high school, mostly now in the high school. More recently, I've been working mostly with the older high school students preparing for their final IB and university entrance exams. But at the same time, I as part of my leadership role, I work closely with all teachers in the school, but also with the colleagues in the early years and primary schools, to kind of collaborate and build a shared vision for multilingualism across all ages within the school.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, so you're doing it on your own, but you have involved the whole school.
Yes, it's a collective thing that everyone's involved in this. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And so, as I mentioned as well in the introduction, you have taken your school from a stage where everybody could see. I guess when you work in international school, you can see all the benefits of multilingualism, but they were not doing that much with it, to now really using this diversity as an asset. And can you describe first what the general attitude was in class at the start, and how it has changed over time, and what you have done to change it?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think you're right that generally in international schools, there's a lot of kind of linguistic diversity in students from different cultures and languages. And on the one hand, international schools, they often celebrate that. We have international festivals, International Day and these kind of activities, and often multiple languages are offered within the curriculum. For example, within the International Baccalaureate Diploma program, it's required to study an additional language until you graduate from school. So on the one hand, there is this kind of celebration of language, but on the other hand, often that doesn't make it into the subject classrooms. Often, English is seen as the only language of instruction, and there are some in schools, I'm talking in schools generally, international schools generally, maybe an attitude that we need to maximize the use of English because that's the language of instruction within, that's the language of examination. So it's kind of a complex situation where you have both things going on at once. And what the situation in my school really was that there was a positive attitude towards multilingualism amongst staff and students, but this was mostly spontaneous use of the home languages by students as a scaffold to help them with their learning.
Yeah.
So what we would commonly see is students, for example, maybe using their iPad to translate some words using an online translator. They're in the class and they don't understand something, they would open their device and translate the word and then go back to listening in English. Or maybe, for example, they would quietly talk to their buddy who's sitting next to them and shares the same home language, and maybe kind of talking, what did the teacher say, can you help me, or clarifying understanding. And that was really what was going on. So that's what we would consider the spontaneous translanguaging of the students, or unplanned translanguaging, the students and taking that initiative themselves, or maybe even sometimes the teacher encouraged them, why don't you check your translator? So students using that when they need to in order to access some learning. So that's the translanguaging, use of home language as a spontaneous scaffold for learning. But what we wanted to do was to make that more planned and more intentional. And so there's a great kind of a diagram model it's from a ROMTELS, ROMTELS. People can Google that, ROMTELS handbook, and you can see it's a triangle with 3 levels. And this is a translanguaging pedagogy that moves from allowing on the bottom level. So this is a situation in which the teacher allows the students to use their home language. For example, they don't tell them to use only English. They accept that you can use a translator, check with each other. So that's the kind of the base level, and that's probably where we were at as a school community. And then there were some teachers in the second level who were encouraging. So we have allowing, then we have encouraging. Allowing the home language, then the next level up is encouraging the home language. And in that case, you would encourage the students. You would say, well, why don't you work with why don't you guys talk about that in Korean for a few minutes, then come back together. So encouraging. And then sorry, yeah.
You said, so allowing, I guess it's not planned, but
Yes.
encouraging, is it planned then in the lesson?
It could be more planned. It could be in the moment that you just like you realize, oh, the students are not understanding, so I'm just going to suggest you to do this. So it's not quite intentionally planned in advance. It's more responsive to in the moment, I think. But yeah, then the top level is that more planned and intentional, and that's called enabling. So allowing, encouraging, enabling. And in the enabling, that's kind of the ideal vision in which the teacher is, when they're planning their lessons, they're planning their units, they're planning their activities, they're thinking, how can I design this activity in such a way that students can use their home languages to support the learning, but also to enrich the learning and go beyond that kind of just scaffolding. So that's what we're aiming for. It's not just to have a kind of openness to it, but to equip teachers to actually plan units and design activities that are leveraging the home languages within the classroom as a scaffold, but also more than that. So that's when we talk about not just spontaneous translanguaging, but the planned or pedagogical translanguaging, using the home language intentionally as part of the learning process in a more structured way, in the way that you design the activities, in the way you design how the unit and the lessons are structured.
Okay, so as a teacher, I see that I am in the category where I am responsive. So if in the situation I have a student who doesn't speak very well English, I can ask someone else. In my school, they are mainly Bengali speakers,
Yes.
so I can pair them up. But now I'm wondering, so in theory, I understand. Would you be able to give us an example, concrete example of how it happens, whether with
Sure.
one of your lessons or?
Yeah, so let's so if we think about let's say a history class, and in the history class the students are going to write a report. They're going to research a topic and they're going to write a report. about that historical period. I'm just picking an example. So what we might do so we're going to design for the multilingualism, we're going to design for the translanguaging. We know maybe we can't change the end result, that they have to write this report through English or something. If that's just, imagine that's the kind of constraint of the situation we're in. What we can then do is say, okay, we're going to plan the way that we're going to structure the task so that the students' first step is to research their historical period, or whatever the topic is, research it in their home language. So using websites and resources in their home language to research that, and maybe work with a partner who shares their language if possible to do that research together. And then they were maybe going to regroup the students so that they're in a group with different language backgrounds. After they've had time to research and process and do their translation with their buddy, maybe we're going to regroup them. So then they're going to share their findings, and then you're going to have different perspectives because they've done the research in different languages. So they're going to be able to like think on a much deeper level and compare and contrast the things they found out, and then use that to kind of synthesize together to work out to produce their report. So you can see in that simple example how the structure of the sequencing of activities is shifting between the languages, and then we can shift back and forth. Maybe they're going to, if we can get them to produce a multilingual report in which different languages are used to write that report, not just English, if that was something we could do. So that's an example of how that might kind of unfold within a unit. We can also think of it within a particular activity. And one example I use, many teachers, we use the think, pair, share routine, right? When we do activities, we ask students first think, then discuss with the partner, and then share with the class. So one way I've kind of modified that to embed different languages, I say think, share, think, prepare, think, pair, prepare, share. So first the students think about their ideas, then they buddy up with someone who shares their home language, and they discuss in their home language. That's the pair stage. So we're specifically asking them to do that in their home language. And then they are preparing to share that in English. They're going to be using both their English and their whole other languages if they need to kind of get their ideas ready, translate key terms, prepare, and then they're going to share using English so that everyone in the class can engage with their ideas. So that's a kind of routine that's been designed to embed the use of home languages within it.
Okay, I see. Just two things that came to mind is regarding history. I can really see the benefits of doing this in languages, because different countries are going to tell an event from their perspectives.
Yes.
So then it can really show like the different point of views on a certain event, historical event. So that could be so enriching.
And that's where you see that translanguaging is first, so teachers sometimes they confuse it with translation. It's not the same as translation. We're not just taking some text and translating it into another language to understand it. It's not about that. It's about shifting between languages, using all the resources we have. So that's the first kind of misunderstanding. We can use this example to illustrate. And the second one, I think, is that translanguaging, use of home language, is not just a support or scaffold. It's so much more than that. It can enrich and diversify the learning for everyone. So in that kind of lesson we've described, where research is happening in different languages and coming together and synthesizing and comparing, that promotes deep critical thinking and enriches learning for everyone. And it shifts the power dynamics within the classroom, because then everyone has something to contribute from their own kind of unique perspective and backgrounds. And if there is a kind of a monolingual student in the class who maybe not be able to use different languages, they're still going to benefit from that kind of enriched, diversified learning space.
Okay. And so you said you have students who speak English better than other languages, others speak their own language better than English. Do you ask students to research in their strongest language or just in other languages? So for example, if they speak two languages but they speak English better, would they still be asked to research in that other language, or do they research in English?
I think I like to leave it open for the students to
Yeah,
give them options. So I might say you use however you want to research this. Use all your languages. Use any language you feel comfortable with. So kind of giving students the autonomy. And sometimes students might say, "Oh, no, I want to mostly use this language. I want it." So giving them that kind of agency to make those decisions, but as well as helping them to make those informed decisions. So to say, okay, yeah, maybe there's a reason why you might want to research this in another language, even if you're not that confident at reading and writing in that language. Why not have a try, because it will enrich the learning, because you can find out something different. So having those kind of conversations can help the students, because we also need them to realize that it's not just something you do if you need to because you don't understand. It can
yeah,
be something that goes much deeper than that. And
that's
maybe I
true.
can share another example to kind of
Yeah,
illustrate what I mean. And it's interesting to use an example from English, kind of a high level English literature class. So we can
yeah,
think about that. So in this class, the students were learning about a Shakespeare. They were reading a Shakespeare play, Midsummer Night's Dream, and they were focused on one particular scene. And what we were able to do is, using online resources, World Shakespeare websites, we were able to find that the production translated into the 3 different languages that were in the class at that time, different home languages that were represented in that class. So we watched that scene in all of those languages, as well as the English production. And then we asked students to compare. And so there were students watching, for example, that the Korean production who didn't understand Korean. But that didn't matter, because the purpose of the task was to compare the different versions that they saw. And they were able to then draw those comparisons and talk about the costume, the staging, the settings, and what different decisions the directors had made as it was like translated from different cultural contexts. And then the students who did understand the languages could then offer their perspective, say, well, how was this idea translated and expressed differently in the different language versions? So you can see that really can promote like a deeper level of thinking when we bring that in. That actually helps the students on the like conceptual level in terms of understanding the concepts of theater and drama and literature in a deeper way, through bringing in those multiple perspectives and different languages and cultural interpretations.
okay. Wow. Yeah, I can see that then it doesn't become just like I can't do it in that language, so I do it in that other language. It's just like it's so enriching that it would
Yes.
be a shame not to use
Yeah.
this. Wow.
There's definitely a place for it as a support and a scaffold, but it's not the only way that we can use home languages. And these kind of things normalize the fact that there are that, and they legitimize that other languages have a place within the classroom, because often that's the kind of implicit message that sometimes students receive, that only the particular language of instruction, which in most international schools is English, so let me just say English, students receive that message implicitly all the time, that English is the language that we use at school, and there may be other languages that we use at home, but English is the important school language.
Yeah.
So if we
Wow.
make space for other, that's the supposed right idea. If we make space for other languages, and then students start to see them as important and valid and legitimate, and there is an opportunity, and they as bilingual, multilingual students, they bring something valuable to the classroom context.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I didn't think it would go that far, but it's so enriching. And so I think it took a few years to get to that stage
Oh,
where,
and we're still in that process, to
okay,
be honest. This what I'm describing are kind of ideal moments that we're having, that we're collecting, and we're still on that journey. There's that kind of, that's the vision really that I'm outlining, and there's some cases where we're more successful than others.
okay. Because so I can see now, if we see such lesson, or like from the teacher or student's perspective, it really shows how to say, how rich the conversation becomes, the thinking becomes. But on the way, did you get any pushback from teachers or
Mm.
students, or do you feel that it went quite smoothly, even if maybe on a technical side it wasn't easy?
I think there are some challenges, and there are always some, any school that's trying to implement these kind of more we're part of language friendly schools group, that anyone can research. That language friendly schools network is a really great network and great resource. So any school that's trying to become more language friendly or trying to embed these kind of more inclusive practices or translanguaging, there are going to be barriers in the way. And those barriers, I talk about them in terms of the 3 Ps. There's going to be policies, practices, and personal beliefs. So there's going to be policies that are maybe preventing us from doing this, and then we need to rewrite those policies. So schools, most schools have some kind of language policy, maybe written or maybe not actually documented, but some kind of policy in terms of what languages are allowed to be used. And maybe that's the first barrier. If there's still some schools out there have those kind of English only policies or single use language policies, then that's the first barrier we need to overcome. Then there are practices of teachers in terms of access to resources. Do teachers know how to use languages? Do they have this kind of understanding of languages? And then there are maybe beliefs that get in the way, personal beliefs of thinking, okay, and some of them are related to kind of fair or reasonable concerns. So let me share some examples. Teachers may be concerned that if the students are using their other languages and I don't understand what they're talking about, what if they're doing something naughty? What if they're off topic? Or what if they are being mean to each other and they're bullying someone and I can't understand what's going on? And I think that's a kind of a fair concern. But in that case, we need to reframe that conversation away from the language and towards the behavior, so we can separate the language and the behavior. And if the students are off topic and they're not focused on their learning when they're speaking their other language, the problem is not they're speaking the other language. The problem is that they're off topic. If the students are being mean and bullying someone in their home language, the problem is not using the home language. The problem is the bullying. So these issues can be dealt with as behavior issues, that schools have established kind of behavior policies and programs to deal with those issues. So we need to separate that. And then we can find, sometimes teachers say, well, I need to make sure that they use English because then I understand what they're talking about and I can prevent any problems. But actually there are ways you can monitor without understanding, and we need to maybe become a bit more like comfortable with not knowing everything that's happening all the time, and put that in and educate students about their responsibilities. So in my school, we now start talking about language rights and responsibilities, and we have a charter that we, as a whole school community, we came together and created this charter of language rights and responsibilities. We did that as part of Mother Language Day. That's where it was started, and so we went through this big consultation, and the students proposed what they believe are our language rights and also the responsibilities that come with those rights. So, and this is posted on the wall in every classroom, and students and staff agreed to this charter. So it says things like we have the right to use all our languages to help us learn. But then we also have a responsibility to make sure we're not excluding others when we're using our languages. So there's a need for, and the students, that's an important skill to have, is to be mindful and aware of how we're using languages. If you're in a group and there's a group of three of you and 2 of you share one language and the other student does not share that language, it doesn't mean, to be inclusive doesn't mean you have to stop using your language. It just means you need to monitor and be aware of how that other student might be feeling. And if you're both laughing and having a joke and that student's looking worried, then maybe you need to just explain, we're not talking about you, we're just sharing this, and explain to them what you're talking about. Get them so don't feel worried. And those kind of more sophisticated approaches of educating the students to think about their rights and responsibilities can help them to navigate those kind of complex issues around, like, how can we balance inclusion with the diversity? The solution is not to force everyone to speak the same language, because then you're just excluding different people. The solution is to educate students to make those kind of languaging decisions in a more careful and self-aware ways.
Wow, I'm blown away. It's lots of things I didn't think about, but it can
Yeah,
resume.
and I've kind of moved away from your question, but your question was some of the kind of the barriers that we face or challenges, and that's one of them, that teachers are worried, oh, I won't understand what's going on, and some people will feel left out because they don't know the language. So reframing it in that way, in terms of like thinking about our rights and responsibilities and helping students to better understand that. And then once we have that kind of charter, we can then say to students, okay, in this situation, what do you need to do? Because what's the inclusive thing to do? How can you use your, and we're not saying don't use your home language because someone doesn't understand, but you need to think, oh, when do I need to then summarize what we've been talking about, and when do I need to ask questions in English to bring that person into our group work task? And those kind of things, children can do that. Children are always doing that. They do that naturally. They're used to switching between languages, and from a young age, children know, oh, this person, I speak to them in English, this person, I speak to them in Chinese, because that's what they understand. They're used to making those shifts naturally. So we just need to help them reflect on that and think about that in a more kind of mindful way, I suppose.
Okay. So I guess that's from the teacher, from people inside the school, it's quite
Yes.
positive and everyone is involved. And what about parents? Did you have any parents who were like worried, for example, saying, yeah, but my child doesn't speak very well English, so if you allow him
Yes.
to speak in their language, how is he going
Yes.
to improve? You had that.
I think that's a common perception amongst many people. Maybe they believe that, oh, I want to learn. Well, I want my child to learn English. I've come to an English speaking school, so I want them to learn English as quickly as possible. Therefore, I want them to be surrounded just by English.
Yeah.
So kind of like just total immersion. Firstly, I think, yeah, that's not actually possible to achieve that in a like linguistically diverse community where there are different languages. You can't just prevent people from using their languages. Pragmatically, it doesn't really work. But on a kind of pedagogical basis, there's like strong research base that shows that maintaining and developing the home language will have benefits in terms of your academic learning and in terms of learning an additional language. So having a strong base and foundation in your home language and maintaining that and continuing to develop that will help them to learn English as well. So it's about saying it's not an either or situation. And if we explain and educate parents and help them to see how we're making those planned and intentional shifts between languages within our curriculum, and we're balancing, and we're not neglecting to teach English. We're still teaching English. English is important and essential in terms of like our context and like as a kind of a global language, all these kind of ideas. We still that, but you can do that as well as maintaining and emphasizing and valuing home languages as well. So it's not an either or situation. It's a both and it's it's going to be beneficial. So it's about helping parents to see that and understand that.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm thinking, because it's an event about multilingual literacy, I was wondering if you knew about your colleagues who teach younger students about learning to read and write. Do you use the home language in these situations as well, or do you go through just English?
I think there's definitely a place for all. Yeah. So if we think about younger students who are just learning to read and write, like even asking, you're going to read a story, asking, or you tell a story, asking the students to narrate that story, to tell their story in their home language, before they start writing it, maybe in English or whatever language they're learning to write in at that time, is definitely beneficial and helps them to generate their ideas and to talk about that. And this is kind of this is a hot topic at the moment in terms of many researchers and educators talking about the science of reading and phonics and these kind of questions and how that relates to multilingualism. And because a lot of the research that is being used in multilingual contexts like international schools is coming from more of a monolingual perspective, and it may not necessarily translate. So it's an interesting discussion that we need to kind of engage with that kind of so-called research, so science of reading research, and to think about the understanding from phonics, and also understanding the differences between how different languages work, and the reading systems and the writing systems, and that how the phonetics, the symbols may be the same in some languages, but the sound system may be different. So it's about how can we educate teachers to kind of understand those differences between how languages and the different ways of learning to read and write when you have a kind of character-based language like Chinese, which also has the pinyin alphabet system as well in terms of pronunciation. So relying and using the expertise of our colleagues who teach Chinese, for example, with the homeroom teachers, to work together to understand those differences, and also the insights from research, we need to bring those in. So I think it's a complex issue, but we need to look at it in terms of that, bringing that expertise into our classroom and into our practice. And then also like looking at the structures, what reading materials do we have in our school classrooms and libraries that are available for students in different languages? So is there opportunity, for example, students are reading a story, is there opportunity for them to also read that in their home language? And how can we get parents into the classroom to read stories to the class in their home languages, so all students can experience that and be enriched for that? So parents as a kind of resource for the whole class. Do children have family members to read to them in their home languages, or maybe they don't? How can we find maybe older students within the school, older students who share that language, who can maybe once a week or something can mentor those students and sit with them and read together? So we have that kind of home language mentoring program where that kind of thing is happening within my school. So there are those kind of things that we can do to support the students, even if we don't have like explicit reading lessons in that language in our school, especially where there's just one or two students who are using that language. There are still things we can do in those kind of on a structural level to support those students in their reading development in different languages and writing development.
And so I have different questions now in mind, but maybe first to say in the school context, do you feel like the title of this live was to talk about how I'd say it enhances I forgot the title to support the students' learning. So
Yes,
how does it support the students' learning? Did you see a change between either how easier they could learn, or how we talked about how I'd say wider their thinking became, but what kind of changes did you see in students by
I
shift?
think and some of the changes, maybe they are kind of hidden, or they're longer term. It's going to take years to see those shifts. But so there are simple things that you can look at in terms of like higher grades and this kind of thing in terms of their understanding. But in terms of the confidence, right, we can see the confidence levels of students changing. We can see students becoming less reluctant to use their language as they start to change their attitude, or maybe we see them more curious and they're asking more questions, and they're more willing to share. Something happens in the class and the student says, "Oh, we don't have a word for that in my language," and that kind of curiosity and that playfulness of like sharing jokes that work in your one language but don't work in another language, and tongue twisters and all these kind of. And I think that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about parents, what parents can do at home. That's something that all parents can do to encourage that curiosity and the playfulness with language, to see those kind of fun connections and to ask those questions and plant those seeds is something that we may not see the fruits of that for a long time, but that encouraging that kind of open-mindedness, curiosity, inquiry about languages, and like I said, the playfulness of language is really important, I think. So we start to see all of those kind of benefits that is kind of not measured in, maybe it's not measured in test scores, but those individual moments of success that you can see.
Emotional experience of learning. Thank you. And so you touched on a bit on the what parents can do at home. So maybe you personally, how old is your son?
My son's nearly 7, so he's he's 6 at the moment,
Okay.
nearly 7.
And how do you transfer all this
Hmm.
knowledge that you got from your job into your home
Hmm.
with your son? Or
Yeah,
what
of
do
course.
parents do in general?
Yeah, every family's different, every
Yeah.
every child is different, every context is different, and there are situations where students, they, like my son for example, he's exposed to his two main languages all the time, right, in as he's in an English a school that teaches through English, but also in China, so he has access to both of those languages all the time, which is different from other contexts where you may have to work harder to find the exposure to the language. So I think it's every family is different, and shouldn't promote some kind of one size fits all approach.
Yeah.
It's about what works for your family and in your situation. And I think like there's a need for, like, at home, parents to provide access to different materials and learning resources and videos and books and magazines as much as they can, in about topics that their children are interested in. I think that's the key in my experience, is to find the interest of the students, the real motivate of the children, the motivation, and play to that. So
Yeah.
if the child is really interested in football, how can you find those stuff about football in the other languages, so students are more motivated to explore that, and also creating the real authentic motivation for using those languages,
Yeah.
not just because, oh, you need to do this because it's important for your studying, but to encourage and provide those motivations, that play dates in which you know that these children, bringing other children into your home who use this particular language, is going to provide a motivation for your child to use that language to play together with them. Or, going to, when you're visiting your home country, going to a science museum so students can see the exhibitions in the language and follow their interests. Yeah, finding a way to capture their interest and to promote that, I think, is going to be way more effective than forcing them or to use like that's just going to set up a negative feeling about the language. So
Yeah.
I think we need to be patient, and we need to understand it. My son goes through phases where he seems to prefer using English, and he goes through phases where he prefers using Chinese, and different.
Okay.
He's right now he's writing and reading a lot more in English than he is in Chinese, and
Okay.
and that may change in the future based on various
Yeah.
kind of complex factors. So I think we need patience, and we need to understand that it's complex and it's tied to their identities and their self-esteem and their friendship groups and all these kind of things. So it's a complex issue, and we as parents, we need to be patient. We need to kind of keep giving them access to those resources, keep trying to tap into their interests and explore that with them, explore them why they may have these feelings about their languages, and just keep that kind of interest and motivation, and, like I said earlier, the curiosity and playfulness. And remember that, I think you said it in one of your videos I saw once, it's about connection more than communication, and
Yeah.
I think that's key, that to keep that, we will maintain that connection. And even your child maybe they can't do certain things in the home language, they may not be able to communicate certain things, but they still have a special and unique connection to that language that runs deeper than just communicative skills and vocabulary. And maintaining that connection, we can do that in various ways, in terms of the connections to the family members, the connections to the cultural understandings and knowledge. And so maintaining that connection is important, more so than just the communication.
It's like looking at the wider picture. Like you talked about
Yes.
patience. So it's not thinking, why is my son just reading in English now? He needs to
Mm.
read in Chinese as well. It's okay, maybe right now he's reading this, but maybe later it's going to be Chinese. And so
Yeah.
have a bigger look at the bigger picture, not just what's in front of our eyes right now.
Yeah. And how can we use, if they're writing something maybe in English, how can we again then use that as a kind of to bridge to what we want them to try to write in their other language as well. So, oh, how would you say that word? Do you know that word? What's the character for that? Oh, look,
Yeah.
this looks really funny when you draw this character. Shall we draw it together? So those kind of encouraging that kind of, I said it a lot, the curiosity and playfulness.
I have a question from a follower,
Uh-huh.
viewer. it's how can using home language and emphasizing it inside the classroom actually help in the learning process and positively affect the child's general knowledge. So from what I understood, it's a lot about so widening the perspective of
Yes.
it's not just from one angle, it's from different angles if you have different languages. Is there anything you would like to add?
And also about consolidating the understanding, because if the student's able to take a concept and then explore that concept using their home language as well as using English, then they're just representing that knowledge in different ways. They have to think harder, right? They have to think about what do I understand? What's important? How do I express that in the other language? So it's it also helps to consolidate that understanding. And for the students who may lack the the English or the language of instruction, who may not have enough words to understand fully what we're explaining, for them to be able to explore that in their home language builds that basic conceptual understanding that then you can then add additional English words onto later. So if the students understand a concept, then we can help them to use the new language to explain that concept much more effectively than if they didn't have that conceptual understanding and we're trying to also develop that at the same time as we're developing the new language.
Thank you very much. There is another comment, just to say, so he or she says, I totally agree with you in regards of using translanguaging as a repertoire and get the students to bring all what he or she has in their knowledge to express themselves. And yeah, so yeah, it's really empowering to get them to be able to use all their languages.
Yeah, empowering is a good word, I think, and like we said, it's more than just an academic benefit. It's about well-being and self-esteem and valuing and equality and diversity, inclusion within the classroom, and it's also about rights. If we believe that the student has the right to develop their languages, they have a right to use their whole linguistic resources. If we stop them from using language or a certain language, we're actually preventing them from using all of their resources that they have and that they bring to the classroom. So it's if we think about it in a kind of rights perspective as well, that's an interesting kind of lens to look at it through.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we came to the end of the hour. I don't want to abuse your time, take more of your time, but if there is a quick thing you think it's important for people to know that you would like to explain, yeah, feel
Okay,
free to.
maybe there are two things I'd like to say that kind of like maybe summarize and
Yeah.
two kind of beliefs I have that what underpin everything I've been saying today, that maybe it's an important kind of moment to leave it on. They're not really practical things, more kind of philosophical beliefs, but I think they inform the practice. So the first one is that languages are not separate and bounded. They're not separate systems. Languages are interconnected, they're entwined. And if we think about every person, we have this single linguistic resource, this language resource, and that may consist of different words from things that we think of as separate languages, but actually it's a single resource. And it's not like I have one language in this part of my brain, another language in this part that I can just switch it off and on when I want to, or use only this part of it in this room. Actually, it's all interconnected and a single resource. And once you start thinking about it like that, then it's just natural for students to use all of the resources that they have. And why would we prevent students from using their complete language resource within the classroom? So that's the first kind of assumption that we can have, the first kind of point that we want to emphasize, that there's not a separate language, that these are interconnected, entwined in as a resource. Let's talk more about languaging rather than using different languages. That's the first point. The second point, which links partly to what you say about connection, but second point is that language is more than just communication. Language is way more than just communication. We often think about it as grammar and vocab and reading, writing, listening, and speaking, but it's way more than that. language is tied to our identities, our histories, our emotions, our well-being, the power structures that are around us in society. Language is way more than just communication. Sometimes we become obsessed with like the communicative competence and the proficiency levels and measuring those things. Actually, language is much deeper and more meaningful than that. You can ask me, you could ask me, how's your Chinese, what's your Chinese level? And I could give you some labels. Maybe I talk about intermediate, upper intermediate. I can tell you my exam scores. Actually, a much more interesting story is why do I learn Chinese? How does it feel when my son's first words to me were in Chinese rather than English? How does that give me a connection to the language that transcends the ability I have to use the language? It's much deeper than that. It's about my identity and that deeper connection and the role it plays within my family and my life personally and professionally. Those are more kind of interesting discussions than just how good's you're listening, how good's you're speaking, how good's you're reading and writing. So once we make that shift to think about language is much more than communication, then maybe we're a bit less anxious when our kids are maybe not able to do certain things in the language, because we realize that language is much more than just being able to do stuff. It's about the identities and the culture and that, to use that word again, the connections that we have. So yeah, two things to leave you with. Languages are not separate, bounded systems, and language is more than just communication skills.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience in the school and as a parent as well. It was really enriching. Yes. And now I let you go to your weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to watching the rest of the talks in this event.
Thank you very much. So after, in about 3 hours, a bit less than 3 hours, we're going to have Professor McBride, who's going to talk about dyslexia and multilingualism. So that should be quite interesting as well. Thank you very much, Jacob.
Thank
Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Thank you.